Welcome to this explainer. I'm Dr. Kem, and today we're going to completely demystify the fascinating world of descriptive statistics. Our mission here is simple but crucial. We're going to discover exactly how to transform your raw, messy experimental chemical data into reliable, ironclad scientific conclusions. Because let's face it, if you spend any time in the laboratory, you're generating numbers. But what do those numbers actually mean? Well, that's exactly what we're here to figure out.
Let's kick things off with a massive question. One that absolutely every scientist, whether you're in an undergrad lab or running a professional research facility, has to ask themselves when staring at a fresh batch of data. How reliable are your experimental results? I mean, you could have the absolute most expensive, state-of-the-art analytical instruments in the world, but if you don't know how to mathematically and statistically treat the data they spit out, you just can't answer this question.
And the stakes? They're incredibly high. Decades ago, Yates and Healy hit the nail on the head with this quote. They said, "It's depressing to find how much good biological work is in danger of being wasted through incompetent and misleading analysis." And you know what's wild? This is still a huge problem today. Without proper statistical treatment, even your most brilliant, meticulously executed lab work is essentially just thrown out the window, because your final claims simply can't be trusted.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with why statistical analysis matters, break down the 3 statistical categories, dive into central tendency and variability, tackle the distribution dilemma, clear up some common statistical misconceptions, and wrap up with exactly how to report your lab results correctly.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Why Statistical Analysis Matters, the Foundation of Experimental Data. Think of descriptive statistics literally like pouring the concrete foundation of a brand new building. It is the absolute non-negotiable first step. Basically, descriptive statistics involve summarizing and organizing your data so it actually makes sense. Look, before you can ever make broad predictions or hypotheses about a larger population, which, by the way, is the realm of inferential statistics, you have to accurately describe the sample data you have sitting right in front of you. If that foundation is weak or cracked, any scientific inferences you try to build on top of it are going to completely collapse.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 3 statistical categories, organizing your toolkit.
So every single descriptive statistical analysis of lab measurements can be cleanly broken down into these 3 distinct buckets. You've got your measures of distribution, your measures of central tendency, and your measures of variability, which essentially just tell us about our experimental precision. And there's a very specific hierarchy to this toolkit. Notice how distribution sits right there alongside central tendency and variability? A lot of scientists just rush straight into calculating an average. But wait. Before you calculate a mean or a standard deviation, you absolutely must understand the distribution of your data first. As we're going to see in just a minute, the actual shape of your data totally dictates which tools from those other 2 boxes you're mathematically allowed to use.
Okay, Section 3, Central Tendency and Variability, making sense of the numbers. So, when we're trying to figure out where our values cluster together, that's our central tendency, we generally have 2 main options. We typically use the mean, the classic arithmetic average, for data that follows a nice, pretty symmetrical normal distribution. But we rely on the median, which is the exact middle value when you line up all your results in order when our data isn't perfectly symmetrical. The median is great because it ensures exactly half your values are smaller and half are larger, completely ignoring those weird extreme outliers that would normally yank the mean way off center.
Next up, to figure out our variability, or basically how spread out our data is, the standard deviation is our absolute go-to metric for normal data. It tells us exactly how far our individual measurements drift away from that central average. Think about it. A small standard deviation means your results are super tightly clustered together. That's a great sign. It means high precision in your lab technique. But a large standard deviation? Yeah, that means your data is scattered all over the place.
Which brings us to a really fascinating real-world problem in Section 4, the distribution dilemma, when normal isn't normal.
Picture this. You've got a group of university students in a lab, right? They're tasked with determining the theobromine content, that's the bitter stimulant compound, in 28 different commercial brands of 80% dark chocolate. Fun experiment. But when they actually plotted their measurements, the data leaned super heavily to one side. It was not that beautiful symmetrical bell curve we all love. In fact, a Shapiro-Wilk statistical test confirmed this was a very decidedly right-skewed non-normal distribution. And here is where things go wrong. Because the chocolate data was non-normal, the students made a massive statistical error. They blindly calculated the mean and the standard deviation purely out of habit, just because it's what they always did.
But guys, for skewed data, the mean just gets artificially dragged way up by those extreme values. What they absolutely should have done is use the median for their central tendency and the interquartile range to measure the variability. Doing that guarantees your descriptive summary actually represents the true nature of your sample, rather than some crazy illusion created by outliers.
That chocolate bar disaster perfectly sets up Section 5, Common Statistical Misconceptions. Don't fall into the trap.
This is probably the biggest trap out there, confusing standard deviation with standard error. They sound similar, but they are totally different beasts. You've got to remember, standard deviation is a descriptive statistic. It describes the actual spread, the real dispersion of the specific sample you just analyzed on your lab bench. Standard error, though, that's an inferential statistic. It's trying to measure the uncertainty in estimating a much wider population's mean. The standard error tells us absolutely zero, nothing at all, about how scattered your actual sample measurements were.
And this brings me to a massive warning. It is a huge yet crazy common mistake in published scientific literature to report the standard error instead of the standard deviation. Why on earth do researchers do this? Well, the formula for standard error actually divides by the square root of your sample size, meaning the resulting number is always artificially smaller than the standard deviation. People report it simply because it creates a false illusion of highly precise data. Seriously, never fall into this trap. If you want to honestly describe the variability of your experimental replicates, standard deviation is the only mathematically honest choice.
All right, final stretch. Section 6, reporting lab results correctly, the final step.
When you're writing up that final report, to provide a totally complete, transparent, and accurate summary, you must always report these three specific parameters together. First, your measure of central tendency, so your mean or median. Second, your measure of precision, like your standard deviation or interquartile range. And third, your sample size, usually denoted by a little n, which is just how many replicates you actually measured. Please state these clearly. Don't rely on that vague shorthand of A plus or minus B. That just leaves everyone guessing if you mean standard deviation, standard error, or something else entirely.
It's really a complete journey, right? You start with those raw numbers scribbled in your lab notebook. Instantly, you should be asking, okay, what's my data distribution? Once you know if it's normal or skewed, boom, you select the correct descriptive statistics for central tendency and variability. And finally, you lock in exactly how to report those numbers with the correct significant digits. Following the structured pathway is what guarantees a rigorous, bulletproof final lab report.
Now, to make this incredibly practical for your day-to-day lab, here is a quick cheat sheet. These are the exact spreadsheet functions you need to calculate these highly reliable descriptive statistics in literally seconds. Whether you're pulling the mean with the average function, finding the median, or calculating that all-important sample standard deviation, let the software do the heavy lifting. These simple commands take the manual labor out of the math, so you can focus entirely on the science and figuring out what your data actually means.
Wow, we have covered a ton of ground today, from why these descriptive statistics are the foundation of everything we do, to navigating the trickiness of data distributions and dodging that deceptive trap of standard error. So as you head back to the lab to analyze your next batch of samples, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to challenge how you look at every single number you generate. Are your scientific conclusions truly supported by the appropriate statistical treatment of your data, or are they just an illusion of precision? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy analyzing!